Wall Street is named after a wall built by New Amsterdam governor Peter Stuyvesant in 1647. Stuyvesant was concerned about British troops attacking the Dutch colony. Did you know that Wall Street still exists today? The wall isn't there anymore, but it is still a very, very important street in America. Wall Street is home of America's financial center. You can find the New York Stock Exchange on Wall Street.
Dutch rule of New York ended up being very short-lived because in 1664, the English took over. The King of England at the time, Charles II, gave a large piece of land that included what is now New York City to his younger brother James, the Duke of York. So they changed the old Dutch name of New Amsterdam to New York. The British ruled this part of the country for a very long time, and New York became a British colony. A colony is a group of people from one country who build a settlement in another land. Their original country now controls that new settlement. As a matter of fact, the British formed 13 of these colonies all along the Atlantic coast. These colonies became states like Delaware, Connecticut, and New York. The people who lived in these colonies were called colonists, and they were ruled by the British and could not make their own laws. Richmond Hill was a beautiful colonial mansion built in a lovely country estate in what is now Greenwich Village, which had lots of open land in the past. It is called colonial because it was built by the British during the colonial period, which was when the British controlled those 13 colonies. Even though this building was built by the British, it became a very important building in early American history during the Revolutionary War. In fact, it was even used as a meeting place for George Washington, Abigail Adams, and Aaron Burr, three very important figures in the American Revolution. Richmond Hill Mansion doesn't exist anymore. Can you imagine a country mansion with gardens in the middle of Greenwich Village? There are a lot of old buildings that were torn down because they were never preserved. Preservation means that historic buildings and places are protected so that they will be around for many years to come. It's an important way for New Yorkers to learn about the past of the city. Do you know what a historic district is? It is an area recognized by the city of New York for its historic significance. It means that changes can't be made to the outside of buildings without getting special permission. There are a lot of historic districts throughout the city now, even in Greenwich Village.
Hi kids, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history of Washington Square Park. Now when you think of Washington Square, you think of the beautiful park we have today with that wonderful marble arch and that incredible fountain, originally from Central Park, believe it or not. But you don't think of what that spot was originally. Well, believe it or not, originally it was a meeting place for Native Americans. They came there and they played games and they traded and they played drums. But then, as we know, the Dutch came and then the English came and then the colonists rebelled against the English. And here we are. Now it's the United States of America. And what happens? Well, there was a tremendous amount of disease in early New York. And there were a lot of poor people. And many of them couldn't afford to have their families bury them. So the city developed a potter's field. Potter's fields still exist today. They're cemeteries for people whose families could not afford to give them as nice a burial as they would have liked. So that's what it was, but only for about 27, 28 years. And then it became a beautiful military parade ground where they did drills and training. Well, that was around 1825 to 1826. And believe it or not, there were even duels in the park. but this was outlawed just a few years later in 1828. And last, in 1870, it became the park we know today, which was 150 years ago, and it has gone through many changes since then. We hope you can come and see it.
I'm going to tell you now about the Great Elm. This is a famous tree at the edge of Washington Square Park called an English elm. And if George Washington was alive today, he would be as old as this tree, which is 350 years old. Well, just imagine if we can climb to the very top of this tree. We would get a bird's eye view of the Washington Arch, of the fountain, and the fields where the soldiers march. This would be incredible. Hello again. This time I'm going to tell you about Washington Mews. This quaint, beautiful private street is located just north of Washington Square Park and was part of the Lenape Trail. On this cobblestone street, the small buildings you see were once used for horse stables, and today they are used for homes, offices, and artist studios. Notice how small these buildings are and how small they are compared to the skyscrapers behind them. Today I'm going to talk about Washington Square Arch. This beautiful arch was built in 1892 in Washington Square Park to honor George Washington, the first president of the United States. This marble arch replaced a wooden arch just a few feet away, and actually it was just across the street. This wooden arch was so popular that 3 years later, the permanent stone arch was built. When you're in the park, take a walk around this arch and look up at all the carved American symbols at the top. You will be surprised at what you see.